Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmadu wa nasalli ala Rasuli Kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Haven't seen some of you for a long time, so welcome back. I think you've been here before me, but I haven't seen you, so alhamdulillah, we're back in the masjid. The chapter that we are reading in Muwatta is, or the commentary of Muwatta is a chapter on Tahara. So Muwatta is of course because all the other durus are online, this explanation was there. It's a hadith book, like Bukhari, Muslim, but on the pattern of fiqh books. So you'll have Tahara, Salat, the various other ibadat, business dealings, so they're divided by topic, right? There are other books, types of hadith texts that are musnads. You hear this name, you've probably seen somewhere the word musnad, or you hear, meaning that the hadith are narrated according to Sahaba radiallahu anhu. So all the hadiths, not divided according to topics, divided who it's narrated from. So they're a little bit challenging because you'll have to go through each Sahabi and find the specific. Other ulama then later, like Muslim Imam Ahmad, such a big collection, tens of thousands of hadiths. Then an Imam came later on, he rearranged the hadiths, and some of them they repeat in different, because sometimes one hadith has many topics in it. Not just like Tahara, we'll have Tahara in it, and we'll have Salat in it. So you'll have to repeat it in two different chapters. So the benefit of Musnad is usually it's more compact. But then if you repeat the hadith, and of course the books, there's in Bukhari the hadith repeated in one chapter, then sometimes it repeated 10 times made according to the topic, because there's a benefit to that specific topic or chapter of fiqh. So it's a fiqh, it's divided according to the pattern of fiqh. And so we're in the chapter of Tahara, and we're up to, last time we read about we're in the section where the things that necessitate wudu, right? The hadith or the sayings of Sahaba radiallahu anhu relating to al-wudu min al-qay. So now the chapter that we're up to is wudu from vomiting. So Imam Malik narrated that he saw Rabi'at bin Abd al-Rahman, he vomited many times water, and he was in the masjid, and he did not go back to make wudu, and then he prayed without making wudu. So Yahya said, I asked, he said that Imam Malik rahimahullah, he was asked about a person vomiting food. Hal alayhi wudu, does he have to make wudu? He said, laysa alayhi wudu. He doesn't have to make wudu. He just washes his mouth and he rinses his mouth, that's all. Gargles his mouth. According to Imam Malik rahmahullah's fiqh, it's not required. But according to qultu, Shah Walilullah Muhaddis Dehli says, rahimahullah, qultu, I say, Imam Shafi says, anything that exits, then this is his commentary. So he makes a very short commentary. He can make very extensive commentary. One thing to understand is the faqahat in the fiqh that is in Muwatta, the original collection of Imam Malik rahimahullah. There's one of the Imams, Ibn Abdul Barr, spent 30 years on its commentary. 2 commentaries that he wrote on it. Ibn Abdul Barr Andalusi from Spain. I mean, these are like Ibn Abdul Barr, Imam Nawawi, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi. We have certain Imams in our history, they're like in the top 100 in our history. Ibn Abdul Barr is one of those, you can say that, great Imam of Hadith and Fiqh. So he spent his life, like his life's effort, into explaining the Hadith of Muwatta. And other works, of course, he did as well, but those were the outstanding achievements of his life. So Imam Shah Walilullah says, just for those who don't know, Shah Walilullah was a great muhaddis and faqih, a giant of the 18th century in the subcontinent, in Delhi. Delhi is from Delhi in India. And he was such a great alim that at the age of 15, he was a Mufti. He studied all sciences, secular or religious, by the age of 15. He said at the age of 9, he mastered Farsi. By the age of 10, he mastered all Arabic sciences. By 15, he was a qualified Mufti. An alim, was teaching already. By 25, he was already like a giant authority in, like a jurist and alim, has been a teacher for a decade. And the proof of that is that when he arrived in Sindh to leave for Hajj, on the way for Hajj, that the biggest alim of Sindh, which is now southern Pakistan, the greatest alim there, Makhdoom something, I forgot the name, the greatest alim of Sindh, who was in his 50s, he became his student. Right, this is hard today. If some 20-year-old came today and said, what does he know? So this is our problem. Maybe it's a problem in our time more so. But the greatest alim, because I'm his student, I'm his follower now, because he recognizes his scholarly. So this is a master. This book is not just this comment, judgment that he's passing at the end, or commentary. This one line. It's someone who, and then he went to Medina. He brought the science of ulum al-hadith to the subcontinent. There was in a small way, but Shah Walilullah brought it in a massive. He brought the chains of hadith from the ulama of Madinah Munawwarra. Madinah Munawwarra was an interesting place. Muhammad Hayat Sindhi and big ulama, Abu Tahir Kurdi, these big ulama from the world that settled and lived in Medina, Shafi ulama. And they were the triggers for all the revolutionary anti-colonial movements around the world, in India, in Indonesia, and West Africa. It was sort of like a strange backwater. Even one brother I was speaking to the other day, Algerian brother, he was telling us that he was telling about certain ulama in the 19th century in Algeria, because Madinah Munawwarra is like a backwater. Yes, significant for us. We love it because of our deen, but politically on the map, it wasn't. It was a desert area. It wasn't really significant geopolitically in that time. So what happens? All these ulama, they collected there. It's very hard to live there. It was difficult. It wasn't like the facilities that are there now. If you ask anybody, I think Abu Hassan, he was telling my father, Rahimahullah, he was telling him about when he went Hajj like in the 50s or something, how they had to get well water and the water wasn't there to put it through a cloth. Is that right? Abu Hassan, isn't it? Yeah. How the condition, the facilities that are there now were not even 50. So imagine 200 years ago. So the Muslims, where do the scholars gather? They gather in Damascus, in Cairo, in Delhi. These are the places to be, right? The big metropolis cities, all of Baghdad. These are known places to. Like today, people gravitate to big centers of the city. If you want to study somewhere, you have to go to specific places. So anyway, so he went to Madinah Munawwarra. Then he took these chains of hadith. So if you see generally in the world now, although there's asanid of hadith in the Middle East and in Morocco and there's unique, but Shah Waliullah's ones became the most common in the world. Allah gave it qabuliyah. If you see all the hadith, not just in subcontinent, whether you see in the subcontinent, like whatever group they are, Barelwis, Deobandis, alayhi, their chains all go through Shah Waliullah. If you see in Medina University, the hadith, asanid that are given, they're called Shah Waliullah. Even one of my teachers in Kuwait, he was reading his sanad of hadith, then within like 2 generations goes back to India and it goes through Shah Waliullah. So he was amazing. It was an amazing scholar, unique scholar. His works were amazing. He was a Hanafi scholar, but he studied on the Shafi ulama, and he's in this book trying to reconcile, or at least say, well, if you can't reconcile, there are 2 views. These are correct. So he's removing that. And in Australia, I believe that we need to have a little bit of this understanding of the other. If I'm doing this way, this is the way I studied, but somebody's doing different, as long as it's a legitimate view, acceptable in this scholarly sense, academic sense, then, there are things that are wrong people do. There are people that do mistakes and do wrong things. So we cannot call the wrong right. People make up things, especially when it comes to janazah and burials, all sorts of strange things you see people do. And my father mentioned to me once, maybe you saw this, I don't know, Shaykh Muhammad, they put in Quran in the coffin, strange like things you'll see people do, which are not from deen, it's just...
They put it in the grave.
In the grave, yes, yeah.
In the grave. Then I said, Sheikh Said, they put the Quran in the grave.
Yeah.
And he told them, take this Quran out.
Yeah. So of course, when something like that, for example, is done wrong thing, then it has to be corrected. But then there is something that acceptable range of ikhtilaf. That's the mazahib of the Ahlul Sunnah. They're different. It's not black and white. It's this one's right, this one's wrong. Yes, each school adopted according to the principles of the school. This is the most correct view. And then, but the other school had a different. So this is what you'll see in the book. Because I explained this online, so maybe you didn't hear the rules online. So these things were explained previously. So he says that quoting Imam Shafi Rahimahullah said that the exiting of najasa from other than the 2 private parts, it does not necessitate wudu. Imam Hanifa Rahimahullah, he said, yujibu bi sharti. It does necessitate with conditions. Right? So vomiting more than a mouthful. So vomiting, a small amount of vomit doesn't break wudu, but a large amount does. So he's not denying the hadith, but there's a condition there, and he has a basis for that condition. Al-wudu, the next chapter or section, wudu from blood nose and from hijama, cupping. Hijama, cupping, if you take the blood out, I think all of us know that. Imam Malik narrated that it has reached from Abdullah bin Abbas. Just one thing from the previous narration, Rabi'atu Rai, the Imam, teacher of Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi. There's a long story about him, that his father, he went out for jihad in Turkestan, and he came back to Madinah Munawwarra after 30 years. And Abdurrahman Pasha, if I'm correct, the stories from Hayat al-Tabi'een, min Hayat al-Tabi'een, he wrote in there, he said, after Sahaba, I love the Tabi'een the most. So he wrote this book, and in that his story is told. I mean, he tells his father's story. Those, maybe you probably heard this in Mawlana Tariq Jamil's speeches, Imam Rabi'at Rai in Urdu. He's given very beautiful, but it's actually copied word for word almost from that book. And when he came after 30 years, Imam Rabi'a, he was in his house, and the father, Farrukh, but he says here Abdurrahman, I think his real name was Farrukh. So he came into his house after 30, he was imprisoned in Turkestan, and it's a long story. And then he came back, and when he left his wife, she was pregnant. So he's come to the neighborhood where his house is. So he entered with his armor and his horse into his house. He looked at it as the eyesight's become weak, and he's trying to, this is my house, maybe this is not my house. And then he entered the house, and there's a young man in the house, and he jumped up. He saw old man entering. You know, if somebody enters in your house, what do? So, but also hijab, ladies are there, and he went and he grabbed him. And he said, don't you have any shame entering the Muslim house without permission? He said, this is my house. First, you're breaking entry. Now you're claiming it's your property. So then as their voices raised, the boy's mother, or the young man's mother, she saw, she had the back to son. And through the wrinkles, she recognized her husband. The face of her husband from 30 years ago. And when she saw him, she screamed, Rabbi, don't you know who this is? Your father. Right? This is your father, the one you're holding. So he started kissing his hand, kissing his feet. So thousands like this sacrifice for us to be Muslims. The thousands like this gave their families were sacrificed. People of Madinah Munawwarra, people from Hijaz, they went out all these lands, they sacrificed their lives. They made their graves all around the world. So then he went to Masjid Nabawi, and he was telling his whole story. He said, where's Rabi'a? He's gone to the masjid with the first azan. As you know, Madinah Munawwarra has 2 azans. So we went to Medina after Fajr, there was dars. And it's a long story, I'm shortening it just for just one of the narrators on Imam Malik is quoting from this masala, or the action that he's doing, because he's one of the fuqaha, the jurists, the ulama, imams of Medina. So this matters, because when you do something in Madinah Munawwarra, in that time especially, it's an authority to it, because there's like big imams, sahabas, children going to correct you whether you're doing something out of place or not. If you express a view on deen, there's a whole society to correct you, to tell you, what is normally been normalized in Medina and the piety of that time, the best generations. So when he went to the masjid, he missed the Jama'ah, he prayed outside. There was a big majlis in the Masjid Nabawi, and so and his father was a tabi'i, meaning he was a companion of Sahaba. And so when he was, he came, he sat, and after he asked, because he couldn't see who was giving the dars, so he asked someone next to him, who is that giving at the end of that? He goes, are you from Medina? He goes, yeah, from Medina. Because you're from Medina, you don't know who this is. He's our Imam, he's our Mufassir, he's our Muhaddith, he's this, he's this, he's this, he's that. He's telling his whole story. And when he finished, he goes, whose son is he? He goes, this is Farrukh's son, he's gone in the path of Allah, we don't know, he's gone in jihad, you don't know he's dead or alive, he's gone, who else son? And he started crying. So this is, he missed his family, his child, everything, but Allah gave him a son who is a teacher of Imam Malik, Imam Hanifa, Sufyan bin Uyayna, Sufyan Thawri, all the big Imams, he's their teacher. He's Imam Rabi'at Rai. This is not a teacher of Imam Malik. So point being that I thought I'll share that with you, because all of these names that I mentioned, each person can write a book on their lives and so forth. Each narrator that is giving who these people are, because we read the end of the hadith. Rasulullah ﷺ said, but Rasulullah ﷺ telling us this, Sahabi had to narrate it to a tabi'i, to a tabi'i, to the chain up to Imam Malik or Imam Bukhari or whoever, Imam Ahmad. There's a chain of people that took that amana and tried to preserve it and pass it on. And then Imams came to critique each narrator to make sure that he was honest. He had a good memory, that he didn't make mistakes. He was not known to make mistakes in his memory. Right? I listen to my recording sometime afterwards, the mistakes I make. I'm amazed. I'm reading it, I'm making mistakes. Like I'll read something and I'll realize that I listen to check if I'm saying something wrong. I can't believe that I read the name totally wrong. Or I'll say this is okay. And then I have to delete it out of it because I realize actually you're making mistakes. And I'm thinking I'm saying something else, and so this is imagine they had to critique us. I'll be da'if jid, very extremely weak. Don't listen to him. Allahu alam. But anyway, you can go find the book and check yourself, inshallah. So the next about the blood. So Imam Malik rahman narrated that he reached Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma that he had a blood nose. He went out, washed his blood. Then he returned and continued the salat where he left off. So the Hanafis follow this view. If you break wudu, you go out, make wudu. Other Imams say no, you have to restart again, it's finished. But based on these riwayat, they go out, you can make wudu without talking, as long as you don't talk to anybody. Make wudu, come back, continue where you left off, even if following Jamaat or praying individually. Malik narrated Abdurrahman ibn Harb, there's masail related we won't go into now. What happens, how do you make up the rakat? Like you've done one rakat with the Imam. Then you go out, miss 2 rakat. Then you go out and make the wudu and so come back. You only do the minimum acts that you need to do. Don't do anything extra. Then you come back and join the Jamaat. Then how do you make up the extra rakat? So for this, in fiqh books, these details are there. Imam Malik narrated from Abdurrahman ibn Harb al-Aslami that he said that I saw Sa'id al-Musayyib. He was this most senior tabi'i, one of the great scholars of Islam and from the tabi'in. He had a blood nose. He went out until it covered his fingers, but and it went from his nose. The blood came out of his nose. He prayed and didn't make wudu. Right. So there is a difference amongst the jurists. The Hanafis say if the blood flows, it breaks. Wudu. If Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad said if it comes out, blood comes out, it doesn't in itself. It doesn't break. It breaks the wudu. What you have to do is, but they all agree that it's najis. And if you have najasa on you, you have to clean it. But as to you have to do wudu. So there's difference. These are the narrations, some of the narrations in regards to those masail. Malik narrated Abdurrahman al-Mujbir that he saw Salih bin Abdullah, that he went, blood came out of his nose, covered his fingers, he went out and he prayed and did not make a new wudu. Nafi narrated Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu. So this is considered the golden chain in hadith, the strongest chains. Malik from Nafi from Abdullah bin Umar. This is considered the most authentic, from the most authentic hadith. Imam Malik narrated from Imam Nafi, and Imam Nafi was the freed slave of Abdullah bin Umar, the son of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu. Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu is one of the greatest authorities among the Sahaba, greatest fuqaha, jurists, one of the greatest jurists of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. That when he bled, he made wudu, and then he came and did not speak to anybody, and he continued his salat where he left off. So he made wudu. So then you see a contradiction here. Hence, you understand why these imams later adopted one view, and then how do you explain the other hadith? They will interpret the other hadith to fit. They don't leave the hadith, but they will have to reconcile, they make tatbiq, reconcile the hadith in a meaningful way, put them together in a meaningful way. Malik narrated from Yazid bin Abdullah Qusayt al-Laythi that he saw Sa'id Musayyib, that he had a blood nose, he prayed, he came to the room of Salama radiallahu anha, water was brought for him. Wudu in Arabic is the water for wudu. Wudu is the fi'al, the action. Wudu is the water that's used for wudu, right? With a fatha at the start. And he came, ثُمَّ رَجَعَ فَبَنَى عَلَى مَا قَدْ صَلَّى. So he came, did wudu, went back, continued his salat where he left off. Right? Imam Malik rahimahullah said, Al-amru indana, according to us, meaning scholars with him and the ulama Medina, that you don't make wudu from a blood nose, or from any blood, or from pus that comes to the body, and not to make wudu except for those things that break wudu from that exit the two private parts, whether it be air, whether it be urine, stool, etc., or from sleeping if you sleep, which I mentioned in the last lesson. So Shah Waliullah says, I say that Imam Shafi rahimahullah believed that blood nose, hijama, they do not break wudu. Like blood exiting from other parts of the body, and a hadith, if you do something in salat that breaks wudu, it breaks us. Then he should make wudu, and he should return and start a new salat. Right, and this is in jadid. Jadid means new. So Imam Shafi rahmahullah's madhab school has jadid and qadim. So when he went to Egypt, he reviewed his whole school. So this is called Jadid, the new madhab. And majority of the masail, except for about 20, the scholars of the Shafi school, they take pretty much everything in the Jadid school except for about 20 or so masail. The Shafi scholars don't know which masail. There's 20 views of the old school. They felt that even those were stronger than the Jadid school, the new school. So it's Qadim and Jadid, new and old. So he reviewed the last few years of his life. He went to Egypt, and that's where he passed away. There's a suburb, I went there, in Cairo, called Imam Shafi. I stayed in Imam Shafi for 4 days. And the suburb is called near Qarafa.
All the cemeteries, right?
Yeah, Qarafa. This is the place where big imams are buried there. Anyway, necropolis. That's in English. Qarafa is necropolis. Anyway, so this is so he didn't have the view that you can continue the salat where you left off. And what is narrated regarding the wudu, this is about washing the blood, and he uses the proof of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, when he made hijama. And all that matters is you have to wash the mahajim, the place where the hijama was done. And if somebody's clothed and body becomes najis with the blood, because blood is najis, where everybody agrees on this, then they have to, and then he can make his salat. But this is his qadim view, and he left this view. Meaning he also had the view at one point that you come back and continue salat. But in the Jadid madhab, Imam Shafi rahimahullah left this view. He didn't follow this view anymore. Meaning that you have to start the salat from scratch. Imam Hanifa rahimahullah said that yanqudani idha kana damu sa'id. So he said that wudu, blood bleeding from nose or from other parts of the body, only breaks the wudu if the blood is flowing. So if it comes out of the wound. So that's how he reconciles it. Is that understood? Like he reconciles it. That what do you mean by all these hadiths about bleeding? Doesn't break. He said no. There's some hadith that does wudu was made. Some riwayat mention Sahaba's action and so forth. Wudu was made again. But what about the bleeding? So if he takes the view that bleeding does break, but with the condition that it flows out of the wound. Yeah, so this is the condition of Imam Hanifa. The next section, Tarkul Wudu, this is going a little bit longer. I do apologize, but I'll finish the chapter that I prepared. Leaving wudu from what is cooked. Making wudu from what is cooked. So if you eat cooked food, you have to make wudu. Alright. No, there's hadith on it. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated hadith. The hadith is sahih. But the scholars of Islam say that this is mansukh, abrogated. This was there at one point, but it was cancelled later on. And the views of Sahaba and the other riwayat I mentioned regarding this. So, tarkul wudu mimma, the leaving of wudu, not like you don't have to make wudu when you eat something that's cooked. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu followed this view that you have to make wudu. One of my teachers, his brother is an alim, is a mufti. He practices this. Hassan Basri rahimahullah, big imams had this view. So it's not something like, it might seem strange to us, but none of the four imams and their schools adopted this view. Right?
If you eat the camel,
Well, camel's a different masala, it's coming up later. Inshallah, we won't confuse it with that one. Imam Malik rahimahullah narrated that Zayd bin Aslam narrated from Ata bin Yasar that Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ate the shoulder of a sheep. ثم صلى ولم يتوضأ. He prayed and did not make wudu. So Imam Malik is giving dalil that you don't have to. He's giving his proofs. Imam Malik narrated from Yahya bin Sa'id and from Bashir ibn Yasar, the freed slave of Bani Harisa, who narrated Suhaib bin Nu'man that indeed that he informed him that Rasulullah, he went out with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the day of Khaybar, the battle of Khaybar, the conquest of Khaybar, until they went to a place called Sahba, which is the lower part of Khaybar in the direction of Madinah Munawwarra. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he settled there, he prayed Asr, then he asked for the provisions to be brought, tosha, like provisions, azwad, and they came with sawiq, roasted barley flour, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they put water on it, for thuriya, meaning they bulla, they put water on it, soaked it, and then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ate it, and we ate with him until Maghrib came. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam got up, rinsed his mouth, and he rinsed his mouth, and we rinsed our mouths as well, and we prayed without making wudu. Imam Malik, what's going on outside? Making chai. I know, it's alright. Imam Malik rahimahullah narrated from Muhammad al-Munkadir that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked for some food, and it was bread and meat was brought near to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like served to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He made wudu after he had the meal, and he prayed, and the extra food was brought afterwards, and he ate it, and he prayed without making wudu. Imam Malik Rahimahullah narrated that Abu Na'im Wahib bin Kaysan narrated that he heard Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari said, I saw Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu eat meat, pray, did not make wudu. Imam Malik Rahimahullah narrated that Muhammad al-Munkadir, he narrated from Safwan bin Sulaym, that he informed that he was informed by, from Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Haris al-Taymi, from Rabi' ibn Abdullah ibn Hudayr, that they had dinner with Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. He prayed and did not make wudu. Malik narrated from Damra ibn Sa'id al-Mazani, from Aban ibn Uthman, and from Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, third Khalifa, that he ate bread and meat, then he rinsed his mouth, washed his hands, wiped his face with it, with his hands, and then he prayed and did not make wudu, like as we know, a complete wudu. Imam Malik narrated from Yahya bin Sa'id that he asked Abdullah, that Abdullah bin Amir bin Rabi'a asked regarding that he asked Abdullah bin Amir bin Rabi'a about a man who makes wudu for salat, and he had food that was cooked by fire. So in that time there's a question that somebody asked, should he make wudu? And he said, I saw my father do like that, and he would pray and he would not make wudu. Malik narrated from Musa bin Uqba bin Abdurrahman bin Zayd al-Ansari that Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, he came from Iraq, and he entered Abu Talha, he came into the majlis gathering, or into the company of Abu Talha and Ubay bin Ka'ab. So they put some food for him that was cooked, like a cooked meal, like on the fire. And he ate it and he got up to do wudu. Abu Talha said to him, and Ubay bin Ka'ab said, Ma hada ya Anas a-Iraqiyya? He says, what is this? Is this like a habit of the Iraqis? You know, because they're in Hijaz. So is this like an Iraqi custom? Like you do wudu after eating? فقال أنس ليتني لم أفعل. I wish that I didn't do that. I hadn't done that. Because they're sort of like telling him like the strange thing. وقام and Abu Talha and Ubay bin Ka'ab, both of them got up and they did not make wudu and they prayed. Finally, I'll just finish with this here. The general scholars of Islam knowledge that which is wudu, those are hadiths that say wudu from cooked food, this is abrogated, mansukh, it's cancelled with other riwayat. That this is something that was done, but it's stopped. Rasulullah. So there's many things like that, nasikh al-mansukh, things that were there before, and then later on from the Sunnah as well. And some of them interpreted this that this means wudu, when it's mentioned these riwayat, means washing the hands and the mouth. Because the Arabs, they use the word wudu not just for wudu like we do for salat, you know, that we wash the 4 limbs as ayat Quran orders us to do. Wudu also means that you wash your hands and your mouth after you finish eating. So this is the interpretation of those ahadith as well, that this doesn't literally make, because there's some hadith saying they make wudu, some saying that no, that wudu is referring to the wudu of, like we say, for example, I'm going to go wash up. Now that's a generic statement. So wash up could be interpreted, I'm just something close that we may be able to understand. I'm just going to go wash up, right? Or I'm going to go to the bathroom. Now what you do in the bathroom could be, you know, so you may mean wudu, right? You may mean something else, right? I'm going to go wash up could mean a complete wudu, or it could be it's generic term. So wudu also has a sharia term, which is wudu as we do for salat, إِذَا قُمْتُم مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ, but also has a meaning, in Arabs understood it to mean to wash or rinse, to wash your hand and rinse the mouth after eating a meal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding and tawfiq to practice. As I said, some ikhtilaf, especially in society where different madahib exist, Muslims that come from different parts of the world, we need to normalize and understand. Alhamdulillah, most Muslims are getting used to it, but if you freshly come from one country, your whole life you only seen Hanafis, then everything a Shafi does seems wrong. And then if you come only from a Shafi, you come from Egypt, you come from Indonesia, everyone does Rafa Yadayn, the whole country does Rafa Yadayn, the whole country does Amin bil Jahar. In this mosque, when we came, Muhammad Izzat can tell, remember that when we came in Jummah, we used to laugh. I'm talking about 30 years ago when we were kids, we came from Karachi. Because in Jummah, all Arab brothers say Amin really loudly. So we used to wait for it, because we never heard it in Karachi. In Pakistan, we never heard, it was 9 years old, we never heard Amin loudly. So when we came here, so we're waiting every Jummah, because during the week there was nobody here in the mosque, like 3-4 people. So it was very loud as well. Like 30, 40 feet. It was like one saf. It was over there, one or two safs. But we're waiting for it. And then when they said Ameen loud, astaghfirullah, we used to crack up laughing. Because we found it because we've never seen it. In 9 years in Pakistan, in our childhood, never seen it. Something very strange for us. So because we haven't seen it, then we think it's not normal. I mean, that's a child's perspective. But sometimes the adults, they also see that, because I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it anywhere in Pakistan, for example, or I haven't seen it anywhere in Egypt or Indonesia. It must be wrong. And rarely, and some countries, alhamdulillah, like Syria especially Syria is a unique case in Muslim, where they have all the madahib, but like in large numbers, large numbers, large Hanafis and Malikis. So they're used to this sort of stuff. But in other countries like this, we need to get used to it and familiarize ourselves a little bit with the masail and differences, and these are normal things. May Allah give us understanding. Sorry, Shah Muhammad.
Yeah, I think because Amin is not Arabic word.
What's that?
The Amin, when you say Amin,
Oh, yes.
it's not Arabic.
Yes.
It's come from Africa.
Subhanallah.
Yeah.
Subhanallah. May Allah give us understanding and tawfiq to practice what we say here. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.